Hello, my name's Jennie Chapman. I head up training at EDF Energy. I'm also the theme lead for Apprenticeships and Pathways, which is the focus for today, day 3 of the Nuclear Skills Festival. So pathways and entrance into the nuclear sector through traineeships is very important to us to ensure that we attract the next generation of workforce to the industry. This theme is traditionally focused on apprenticeships and supporting the industry in putting in place the mechanisms that it needed to have a successful apprenticeships in light of particularly things like the introduction of the apprenticeship levy and the new standard structure in England. This year we've broadened it so that it's focusing more generally on pathways into the sector. And that includes looking at things like T-levels and traineeships and access to apprenticeships, as well as the traditional apprenticeship routes. This is really an important area for us because it not only is an opportunity for us to attract the next generation, but it also allows us to improve the diversity of the workforce that are entering the sector. For me personally, I'm really pleased to be sponsoring this as an area. It's something that EDF, we utilise a lot through our apprenticeships and also our traineeships. So it's something that's very close to my heart and something that is of significant value to us as an organisation. I'd like to introduce Heather Lovell. Heather is going to be our keynote speaker for today, day 3 of the Skills Festival. Heather is an engineer with Westinghouse and has recently completed her apprenticeship, which began in 2015. Heather has completed a high-level technical apprenticeship, but she has also worked in different areas, both technical and in the office areas at Westinghouse. She recently was awarded the Engineering Apprentice of the Year and the Apprentice of the Year overall in the 2020 Nuclear Skills Awards. So she's an ideal person to talk to you about what apprenticeships can mean. She is a massive advocate for apprenticeships, and she will be sharing with you her experiences of going through an apprenticeship.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Heather Lovell, and I'm an engineer in the product design group at Westinghouse Fuels Limited. I've been asked to do this speech today for the Pathways and Apprenticeships Day of the NSSG Nuclear Skills Festival Week because I'm a keen advocate for apprenticeships, and I also won the Engineering of the Year award and the overall UK Nuclear Skills Apprentice Award at the 2020 UK Nuclear Skills Awards event last March. I thought I'd talk about my own experiences as an apprentice and kind of the journey I took to get where I am today. So when I started at college, I really wasn't one of those people who kind of knew what I wanted to do or how to get there exactly. All I knew was that I really enjoyed maths and science, and I wanted to try and find a career in which I could utilise the skills and learning that I'd gained through those subjects. But when I was at college, the main kind of advice I was given was, if I was unsure of what I wanted to do, was to just pick one of the subjects I was studying and then pursue that through to degree level. So this is actually the route I did initially start with, but I just found it wasn't for me, and it felt like something was missing. So I changed mine, and this is when I realised I actually wanted to gain industry experience whilst actually still getting my qualifications, and that's when I came across the Higher Engineering Apprenticeship at Westinghouse. So I hadn't actually considered an apprenticeship before because, in all honesty, it wasn't something, there wasn't many that I was aware of for once A-levels were done and in the kind of career area that I was looking at for when I was leaving college in 2013. So this is why I went down the alternative route. But once I'd found the apprenticeship and I started looking into it, I realised actually this met all the criteria that I wanted to go with. So I'd be able to work full time whilst going to college one day a week to gain a HNC and then later on a degree. And as I mentioned, this was kind of crucial in what I wanted, because I still wanted to get these qualifications whilst also getting industry experience. So I decided to go against the route that I'd always been told was the best way forward, which was straight into university and degree. And I actually applied for some apprenticeships. And in 2015, I was lucky enough to get a position, and I started my higher engineering apprenticeship at Westinghouse in the August. So throughout this apprenticeship, I completed many placements. They were both plant and office based in a variety of areas across the site, such as with the Oxide Fuels Complex Services team, in the projects department, in works engineering, and in the area that I've got my current job today, which is the product design group. The placements were designed to give me experience across the site, and through them I was involved in numerous site-wide projects, and also I was able to interact with a variety of people in different roles, which I think is fundamental learning in your career. So alongside all of this apprenticeship work, there are so many more experiences that you can also have as an apprentice. So whilst I was an apprentice, I was lucky enough to be sent to quite a few different events, such as the Women in Nuclear annual conferences and the Northern Powerhouse Apprentice Summit. Alongside this, loads of other apprentices were getting involved in charity site events and organising trips, and so going on all the different apprenticeship trips. One of the main things I got involved with was the Apprentice Site Improvement Team, and this gave me the opportunity to be involved and have a direct impact on apprentice and site safety, and which, as you all know, safety is critical in the nuclear industry. So this was a great experience to get. And one of my proudest moments in this team was the creation of the apprentice mentoring cards, which were to be used during apprentice mentoring meetings. These cards were kind of a conversation prompt and covered all different aspects of an apprentice's life, from their education to work to safety to personal life. And they actually won one of the site awards, which I think reiterates that you are an apprentice, but you can have an impact at site, and your opinions are so worthwhile. And I think overall, a big positive I've taken from my apprenticeship is the fact that it had an impact on myself personally. So when I started my apprenticeship, I basically had zero confidence in my own ability, but through the apprenticeship, my kind of confidence has grown, and it's continued to grow day to day, and even once I've come out of my time as an apprentice. So I think even though apprenticeships can be hard because you're juggling working full time whilst going to college, whilst still doing all your apprentice work, I think they're so worth it. I believe that apprenticeships help shape you as a person, and they're a fantastic starter block for your career in your chosen sector, which might hopefully be nuclear, considering you're attending this nuclear festival week, because I actually didn't set out to have a career in the nuclear industry. It was the apprenticeship that first stood out to me, that happened to be in a company that manufactured nuclear fuel. But from starting at Westinghouse, this interest in nuclear has continued to grow. And I find having a job in the nuclear industry is so exciting due to the variety of work, the challenges, the innovation, all of which I get to witness and be involved in. So for me, no 2 days are the same, and within my role, I've been able to be involved in key projects, in maintaining supply chain security, also linking in with project improvements. So overall, I'm really proud to say that I actually work for a company and within an industry that is actually key in meeting the UK's goal for net zero. And I believe that the future for nuclear is so strong and there's so much career potential, whether it is new build, in fuel manufacturing, decommissioning, or everything in between. There's so many opportunities for you all to grasp at. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
I'm now going to hand over to Charlotte, who's going to talk you through the set out for the day today. Charlotte is the shadow theme lead of this work stream, and she works for MOD and is currently undergoing training herself. So is an ideal person to help go through today.
Thank you very much for that, Jenny, and good morning, everyone. My name is Charlotte Burman, and I'm a Marine Engineer Officer in the Royal Navy and the Shadow Theme Lead for the Pathways and Apprenticeships workstream. So what have we got coming up for you today during the Pathways and Apprenticeships events? We're going to start this morning with a live panel session entitled My Apprenticeship Journey, where apprentices from across the nuclear industry will be discussing what it's really like to do an apprenticeship and also how important they think apprenticeships will be for the future of the nuclear sector. After lunch, there'll be a coffee roulette session, which gives you the opportunity to have discussions with other delegates from the conference in a relaxed environment. With lots of different people attending from across the industry today, you never know who you might meet. Following that, there will be 2 concurrent sessions, a STEM workshop for schools focusing on apprenticeships, and a workshop hosted by Women in Nuclear entitled Connecting with Purpose and kindly sponsored by Prime East Limited. I think that all of us have lost our purpose at some point during the last 12 months, so I'm really looking forward to the discussions that happen during this workshop. And to close out the day, we'll be looking at a workshop talking about T-levels within the nuclear industry. A key work stream of the Pathways and Apprenticeships theme is how we get people into apprenticeships, and T-levels is one of those ways. The deep dive that we'll be doing during this workshop into T-levels will hopefully provide you with ideas and insights into how you can implement T-levels across the industry. Finally, don't forget to look at all the other content that's available on the festival website, including the daily podcast. I hope you have a really enjoyable day and find the events informative and fun. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Pathways and Apprenticeships panel discussion. My name is Jennie Chapman. I'm delighted to be joined this morning by a number of panel members who have experience firsthand of going through apprenticeship schemes. They're going to be sharing with you some of their experiences of going through their own apprenticeship journeys and also their thoughts around the future of apprenticeships. There's an opportunity for you to ask any questions as we go through the session, which we can pose the questions to the panel members. So joining me on the panel this morning, I've got Lewis Williams from EDF Energy, Ben Turner from BAE, Elise Taylor from MOD, Katie Whiteman and from Sellafield, and Mike Singh from Glam O'Rourke. Unfortunately, Mike's cameras aren't working, so you won't be able to see him, but he is very much part of the panel. So I'm just going to hand over to each of the panelists to introduce themselves and to share a little bit of their experience of going through an apprenticeship and why they chose that route into the industry. So I'll kick off by inviting Lewis to share his experiences.
Okay, good morning, everybody. As Jenny mentioned, I'm Lewis Williams. I'm now the training delivery manager within EDF Energy. But I started my apprenticeship journey quite a while ago when I left school. I left school at 16, and like many people, I guess, at 16, I didn't really know what exactly I wanted to do with my career, with my job, with life in general. And I found myself coming across an opportunity to join a local firm, a local chemical reprocessing firm, actually, as an apprentice. So I joined that scheme at that time. And I think through doing the scheme, I started to realise that probably my own potential, but also my own appetite and ambition to further progress myself within my career. And then I was very fortunate, within 2 years of starting the original apprenticeship scheme, I decided to apply for a job once I realised what I wanted to do, things I'd learned through doing the initial apprenticeship scheme, I joined the nuclear industry at the age of 18 at Heysham Power Station, where I did a apprenticeship scheme in control and instrumentation to become a maintenance technician. But then since then, it's been quite a roller coaster ride. I feel like some days my feet has never really touched the ground. So my career spanned 20 years now. And starting as an apprentice, I quickly moved on from that to becoming a maintenance technician at Heysham 2 Power Station, which I got the fantastic opportunity to also do a degree in electrical electronic engineering part-time, which then opened up the door for further progression to become an engineer at Heysham 2, before then moving on to becoming a control and instrumentation technical instructor at both Heysham 2 and Heysham 1 Power Station. It was from there, it was that point that I realised I once had a very linear career path in my mind, and I realised there's so many opportunities within the working world that were enabled through my apprenticeship. And this went on to show when I moved over to training, I got a fantastic opportunity to move over to France and become a project manager, working at a power station called Bougé near Lyon in France. Spent a couple of years there and then found myself faced with another great opportunity to move up to Flamanville 3 to train as a reactor operator at the EPR, which many people will probably know is the same design as the station we're building at Hinkley Point C. So of course, natural progression, I moved on to Hinkley Point C, simulator instructor, and then was promoted up to become the group lead or the team leader to build a training team at Hinkley Point C for the future training of reactor operators. Since then, I then got the opportunity to become a senior manager within the company and responsible for training teams in both Hinkley Point C and nuclear generation. And that's where I am now. So thank you, Jenny.
Great, thanks, Lewis. And if I hand over to you next. Ben, can I hand over to you next?
Sorry, it cut out when you said the name. Yeah, sorry. So hi everybody, my name's Ben Turnoff. I'm 22 years old and I'm a 5th year nuclear hire apprentice within BAE Systems submarines. So we design, build, test and commission nuclear powered submarines. So it's probably a little bit different to the other panelists on the call because I work in a defence sector rather than the civil sector. So as I said, we're based in the northwest in Barrow and Furness, and it was similar to the other panelists who have already kind of shared their experiences so far. When I left school, apprenticeships were kind of around, and I was quite favoured in the science and maths kind of subjects at school. I knew that I wanted to carry on learning, so I went to our local sixth form, and it was at that point that I discovered that our local firm in BAE Systems had a sector within nuclear engineering. And for me, that kind of stood out more compared to the other functions. I thought that it was something which kind of provided more exciting opportunities. And the kind of 16-year-old me thought that that was a more exciting way to go down. So my apprenticeship is a 5-year apprenticeship, and it's based within like a nuclear scientist, a nuclear engineering integrated degree. So what that means is that amongst my 5 years, 1 day a week, we also go down to university, and the remaining 4 days of the week we spend within industry. Our first 3 years in our apprenticeship, we rotate around different placements, covering different nuclear functions. So, for example, we cover operations, nuclear safety and security, test and commissioning, and then we also have a placement within nuclear engineering. Within our final 2 years, we then exit into a mutual agreed exit role. This is one which benefits the business and one which suits us as well. This was something when I first was researching apprenticeships and things like that was attractive to me. I thought that this was kind of like I could pick the one that I wanted, and also I had some support from the business as well. The reason why I chose the nuclear industry and specifically the apprenticeship route was that there was also an opportunity within BAE Systems to give back to the local community via stretch assignments. So these are where we could go out into the schools and colleges and get involved and start teaching them and showing them about what nuclear engineering is, as well as having some interface between an industry and the local educations. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Ben. Now you hand over to Elise to introduce herself next.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Elise Taylor. So I'm in my second year out of 5 years of an engineering apprenticeship for the Ministry of Defence. So this is like my first apprenticeship. This is my first job out of sixth form. So I came straight from my A-levels. So I was doing maths, physics and computer science, and I thought, oh, that would make sense if I sort of went into engineering. But I was like, oh, I don't really think I want to do that. So I looked at doing computer science and culinary arts management, or like environmental science at just generally going to university. And then I was sort of like, I don't really want to do any of that. And my mum did an apprenticeship for BAE like 40 years ago, and she was like, why don't you look into apprenticeships? So then I found this MOD one, and I was like, this seems like the right thing for me to do, because I'm using the things that I'm good at, like maths and all of that, as well, doing practical things and actually having a job and having an impact in the business, rather than just sort of going to university and not having that experience. So with my scheme, you could have picked between sort of weapons, aero or nuclear, but when I was there, I was like, the nuclear one really stood out to me being the most interesting one, where I could have a bigger impact in the future and really carry on my career with that.
That's great, thank you very much. I hand over to Katie from Sellafield next.
You're on mute there, Katie.
Apologies, I actually mute myself. So my name's Katie Whiteman. I've just come out of my time as a nuclear worker, so I'm now employed as a control room operator at Sellafield Limited. I think I've been out my time maybe about 6 months, so I'm still quite new in like my early career. But for me, I feel like an apprenticeship when I come out of school was the right route for me. The only thing that held me back was my struggles with my maths, and that meant when I was 21, I managed to get it and I applied for this job. It was something that I'd wanted to do since I'd left school. It was always something that was going on in the background, but I made sure I had a job until I could reach the goal of being able to apply. So when I applied and I got in, I kind of just felt I need to take every opportunity that I get, because for us round here in Cumbria, Sellafield is quite a place you want to work. It offers a lot of great opportunities. So I spent a year in centre learning like the basic ins and outs of my job, and then in my second year I was placed on site in my building that I've actually stayed in now, and I completed rotations. So I've done 3 rotations overall, my final one being in the control room, and then from there actually progressed into a full-time job there. And even now, if like I've only been there 6 months, you don't realise like how much you learn and how much you pick up. And for me personally, like when I got into it, like going in my second year, when you could do apprentice council and you could do all these extracurriculum sides as long as doing your apprenticeship, I took the opportunity to do those because I knew how hard it was for me to get to the position that I was in now. I wanted to help others and make sure that they had the same opportunities that I did. So I was quite involved with like the apprentice coordinators, making sure everyone kind of got their coursework done and stuff like that. I'm still in touch with them now. It's all stuff that I'm still heavily involved in. And from that, I've been nominated as an Intermediate Apprentice of the Year finalist for NSAN. So I've got my awards tomorrow. And I also won the Sellafield Limited Apprentice of the Year awards as well. So even though I got these things, I never expected it, because for me, it was just doing what I'd always wanted to do. And my job gives me so much satisfaction. I enjoy going. And for me, recommending to someone to do an apprenticeship, I would hands down go for it. It's been the best thing I've ever done. I'm 24 this year, and I was scared to go into it at the age that I was. And I can honestly say I wouldn't look back. Like, I definitely don't look back at doing what I have now.
Great, thank you. And good luck tomorrow in the NSAN Awards.
Thank you.
I'll hand over to Mike finally to share his experience.
Good morning, I'm Michael Singh. I work for Bylaw, which is a joint venture between Bouygues and Langeroux on Hinkley Point C. Back in November 2018, I took the big jump from a previous trade I was in. I was a magazine printer by trade and 35 years old, so it was a fair old jump and a big decision, and moving away from home and things like that to go and take a completely different career. But yeah, I mean, I took the jump. I decided to get into the nuclear construction apprenticeship scheme because its value is such a huge project to be part of, and everything that it offers you, and the potential you can find within yourself is so big and vast. And I mean, the site itself, you turn up every day, and it's hard to tell people to try and get them to comprehend the size of the site and everything that's going on here just by telling them. I find it like that every day I turn up, but it's so big to take in. It's fantastic to be a part of, and again, all the opportunities. I got my completion sort of early 2020 last year. Obviously, we had COVID throw a lot of spanners in the works, but I finally got my results in November 2020, and the way they've changed the MVQ and diploma now, where they're pushing it more towards degree level, I managed to achieve distinction through that. And I couldn't have done it on an apprenticeship anywhere else, because they don't offer the things that Bylaw offer. And with the college setup, they've spent millions on all the systems they have down there. So if you're missing out by working on a certain area or a site, that you're not learning the variations within the trade, you do pick them up in college. So it's a good way of doing that, and it just helps you along with being able to go somewhere else, if you didn't want to stay in nuclear after that. But I would definitely recommend staying in the nuclear. During the time I worked in the different areas of Hinkley Point, giving me that vast array of experience in the trade already. Learned lots and lots about site safety, health and safety, trying to promote zero harm aspect, people coming to work and going home safe, and which is massive with Bylaw and obviously EDF as well. And you can't fault that with the statistics over the last few years. It was quite a scary thing, and especially, like I said, with comprehending the size of the site, it's quite daunting when you turn up in those first couple of days, and it can be quite scary. I was 35 years old. I was scared of working away, scared of taking on an apprenticeship, and massively out of my comfort zone, but it is made okay, and I would definitely recommend it to people. I've already recommended people, and I'm heavily involved in the next load of apprentices through and interviewing them and part of the training them. And I can't say enough good things about it, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, that's me down to a T with Hinkley Point, and I love the place.
Well, that's great to hear. Thanks, Mike. And really fantastic listening to all of your experiences and the opportunities that you've all had. I think you're all great advocates for the industry and also for apprenticeships. So thank you for sharing that. So we are starting to get some questions coming through in the Q&A, and I just encourage people to continue to send their questions. We've got a few prepared questions which we're just going to run through, just to allow people a bit of time to ask any further questions in the Q&A, and we will come to those as well. But if I just kick off first of all by asking Elise and Lewis, and Elise first and then Lewis, why do you believe there's still a view that apprenticeships are not as good as a route into employment as degrees? And have you got any ideas on what we can do to kind of break down that perceived stigma of apprenticeships? So if I come to Elise first of all, thank you.
I think fundamentally people just don't seem to understand what an apprenticeship is or what you can actually get out of it. I think people just assume it's something you do at 16. You're like, oh, you're going to go and be an electrician or like bricklaying or something. And it's actually, there's a lot more to it than that. You can do a degree, or you can be doing sort of MVQs, like practical stuff. Like there's so much more to it than just that. And I think that's probably one of the biggest issues, is that people just don't see that as well. Obviously, you don't get the choice of where you get your qualifications from, and I think some people have this sort of idea that you need to be going to a really like good university like Oxbridge or Russell Group, and that might be more important to some people, but I don't think that that's the main thing that you're getting out of it. And I think that's the biggest problems with when you're at school, because I've come straight from a school where if you weren't going to Oxbridge or, you know, Russell Group universities, they didn't want to know that you existed. And it's sort of like, that's the biggest problem, is they're not saying that this is an option. It's just, they're like, oh, it must be university, you need to do that. But it's more than just that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And have you any ideas on how we could break down some of that stigma?
I think it's just promoting them in school and sort of fully explaining like what they are, what you can get out of it, sort of the benefits, and maybe some of the things that you might not get from choosing that route instead of university.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Lewis, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, obviously my experience of apprentices a long time ago, and times have changed as well, but I think there are some things that stay the same, and I agree with Elise actually on quite a few points. And for me, I think the perception that many people have of apprenticeships it's related to the entry level, and I think it's where people misunderstand what a career is. You know, I think as children, you know, we talk about, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And we have this one job in our mind, and it's usually very aspirational. And as we get a little bit older, we start to maybe become a bit more realistic, but we still focus on just this one job, and it's that. And I'll give you an example in my situation where, so by doing an apprentice at the time I did it, the entry level into the business was as a maintenance technician. Whereas if I'd have taken the university degree, the university option, sorry, and gained a degree, I would have joined at a more senior level as an engineer. And so when people step back and think, oh, right, you do an apprenticeship, you become a technician, or you do a degree and you become an engineer. And like on the surface, as a first starting point, that's true. But as we all know, a career isn't just one role. And I think the apprenticeships is a really good starting point for us to build our career, a gateway in. And so when I think back, I think I took definitely the right route, because I arrived at the same level as somebody going through a university route, but without any student debt, with a lot of experience and plant knowledge, great credibility and reputation built on the site. So actually, when I arrived at an engineer at the same time as somebody who'd gone through an alternative route, I was enabled then to excel my career, and that really helped me stand out. So I do think the perception is all about that misunderstanding of, okay, so you do this apprenticeship, you become this person or this role, but that isn't the end of the story, and that's where we need to educate people. So in terms of trying to break the stigma, I think there's quite a few things, and I'd say, you know, obviously apprenticeships have changed since when I did my apprenticeship. With, you know, doing a degree, it isn't an either or choice now. It can be and. You do an apprenticeship, but you also get the qualification, so that's fantastic. Also, I think, you know, doing things like we're doing today, role modelling, you know, what can be achieved through apprenticeship schemes and the careers that we can build is fantastic. And I think probably going back to Elise's point a little bit around, you know, it comes back to school. And I think probably like a few people, maybe Ben mentioned it earlier, that you're going through school and you're not really sure what you want to do. You know, there's lots of options out there, but then you question what's achievable. And I think more education at school in terms of what is a career, not just what is a job, would help people make them decisions and understand that, you know, we all learn in different ways, and there's different routes which are more suited to different people. Neither is better or worse. And if you've got the potential, the drive and the ambition, you're going to achieve that what you want to achieve. So I think, yeah, it's about engagement at schools, early levels, engagement with businesses, helping them show people what career paths exist, not just what jobs.
Great, thank you both. I'm going to ask Mike now just to share with us what he thinks the benefits are of apprenticeships compared with other alternative routes in the industry.
With the apprenticeships, you get there's more experience than just, say, for example, if you went on a site and you wanted to get near the qualifications that I've now got, you would basically be what they call a chippy labourer or a chippy improver, and you're basically put with a mentor and you do whatever they do, and you're in that one section and you learn what they learn, which, depending on the job, may not be good enough to go to too many other jobs. But well, even within the job itself, with the size of Hinckley, it depends on the platform you're on. You could be on a platform doing the same stuff for the whole term of the apprenticeship, and then get moved to another platform and you're not really clued up as to how to do that part of the job as a formwork carpenter. Alongside that, you've got the college feature, which, as I said before, was they've spent millions there, and they've created all these scenarios and situations for different types of work. And you've got walls and decks and slabs and columns and corner walls and beams, and there's so many variations of work that you can learn, but it's purely through the apprenticeship. There's no chippy improvers on this site that have got that advantage and that available to them. And it is similar in all trades. I've been an electrician's mate on sites, and you can only go so far with the same person on the same sort of jobs. But the apprenticeships, especially with bylaw and obviously with the other companies which have come in to EDF on the Hinkley Point site, the vast array of training here is unbelievable. And you know, I'm already into different levels of training with supervisory now. I think within a month of completing it, I was started to be trained to be a supervisor then, and I've been running my own gang since December pretty much, and they're helping me along the way, and I'm going on the courses to get the levels for that now and go into construction management. So the opportunities are immense, and they all come from the apprenticeship in the beginning.
Fantastic, thank you, and great to hear about all the different opportunities that there are, all the different areas of work. Katie, I'm going to come to you now and just ask, is there anything that you wish that you had known in preparation for your apprenticeship, or anything that you wish you'd done before starting your apprenticeship? Katie, I don't know if you're on mute.
I need to remember to take this off mute. So for me, really, it's like you're not expected to know everything like when you first start. It's all new, and it will take you like a couple of weeks to get your head around, like setting too high of an expectation of yourself, which I will hands down admit that I've done throughout my time. I did do that myself. It isn't always a good thing. Like, you're there to learn your role and understand it competently, and you're not going to know everything like straight off the bat and like sit there thinking, oh my god, how am I ever going to learn this? How am I going to do it all? Like, my brain is a sieve. It takes about 3 times for you to tell me something for it to actually go in. So for me, like, the first year, because it was a mix of practical and theory, like, I'd never used a file, a ratchet, I'd never used a wrench in my life, and from that I've actually learned how to build flat pack, which was a big thing for me. Like, I never thought I could do that, but it's the skills that I've transferred not only into work but also into like real life scenarios. And I've always been quite practical with my learning, so I knew I would pick things up a lot quicker in that area. But the second year, that was no different really either. In my second year, that was both a mix of practical and theory. However, for me, it was exams. I'd done 25 over the space of 2 years, and they aren't my strongest area. They make me quite anxious, and they are my weakness. But I'm happy to share that, because you don't build on your weaknesses if you don't own them. That's like how I look at things. So I wish I knew that the level of expectation of me, I could mentally prepare myself, so I kind of knew what I was going into. I got a bit of an understanding, but I didn't really know what was actually going to be going on, what was going to happen over the 2 years, until I was there sat in the room and they told me. But it's all part of the learning curve, and it's allowed me to slowly become more confident. And I think for that, all you can do is best be yourself and stick in and work hard, because good things come to people who graft. And I think for me, it's just don't set the bar too high. Go in, be confident, be yourself, and just kind of enjoy it, but also stick in. That's what I would say.
That's great. Thanks. Some fantastic advice there for anybody who's thinking about an apprenticeship. So I'm going to move on and just pick up a little bit of discussion about access programs and pre-apprenticeships. So this is something that we're seeing is growing within the industry and something that's been sort of encouraged through government policy. And I just going to ask Ben and Mike to share their thoughts on pre-apprenticeship courses and why they think they could be both good for the sector and those coming into apprenticeships. So if I pass to Ben first of all.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. So personally, it's not something that I've properly come across, especially when I was first applying for apprenticeships. I think there's a lot of kind of what Katie was alluding to about expectations back then when you're 16 and that kind of thing. I think if there was some kind of pre-apprenticeship, then it can kind of settle you into that business or that role a lot better. When you're first setting off on something new, like an apprenticeship, and you're 16 and it's the first thing that you've ever done, I think that there's a lot of kind of like it's the biggest thing that you've done in your life compared to other things. And then once you've settled into that role, it suddenly kind of like fades away a little bit, and then the next thing becomes the biggest thing. So I think having a bit of a pre-apprenticeship will help a lot, and just to kind of like settle you into that business, and you can gain some contacts before you do then join as an apprentice. If that was something that was available to me as a 16-year-old, I think I would take something like that up.
Yeah, I'd probably reiterate what Ben said, really. Yeah, I'd pretty much say what Ben said, really. All to help you not be so daunted by everything that you're walking into, regardless of what age you are. I think, maybe even more beneficial for someone older like me, where you're thinking, is this a right move? And I've got all these things going on at home and whatever, and it would give you an insight to, not just money, but into what you're walking into, and will you be comfortable with it, and is it going to tick all the boxes that you expect from it? Maybe something, like an open day or something like that before you actually just take the job on. But yeah, I haven't actually come across any pre-apprenticeship stuff, but I definitely think they would help.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it's something that's relatively used in the minority, but is something that's growing, and keen to kind of get people's views on that. So moving back to kind of accessibility of apprenticeships. So Elise, if you could maybe share with us your thoughts on that, on the accessibility of apprenticeships and upskilling. Do you think there's enough? Or do you think it needs to be made available to a wider audience?
I think overall they are pretty accessible. I think this is sort of one thing that might be more applicable to my apprenticeship, but in your first year, you go and spend the year in Weston-super-Mare at the college there, because you do a level 2 MVQ there as well as you're doing your degree, and it's just that for the first year. But without having sort of provided accommodation for us, there's no way that a lot of people would have been able to sort of join the scheme. They'd have had to have either sort of commuted from home, and some people join this scheme from sort of Yorkshire coming down to work in Bristol, which is obviously quite a long way. They wouldn't have been able to sort of do it, or they'd had to sort of moved in with people they'd never met before into a sort of rental house, which is really quite a sort of daunting idea. So I think that's one thing about sort of accessibility that's quite a big thing for my scheme. I don't know how applicable it is to others, but about there being maybe more apprenticeships. I think there's a lot of apprenticeships, and there's a lot of different ones and a lot of different things that aren't just engineering. There's sort of more management ones, or HR or finance, but I've not really seen sort of more artsy and humanities English kind of apprenticeships. I don't know if that's something that doesn't really exist or needs to exist, but I think it's the promotion of them is the biggest thing. They're not promoted in the same way that university is. Like I don't think I ever saw an advert for any kind of scheme like this, whereas like all throughout sort of UCAS time, you're seeing adverts on Facebook and social media for universities, for UCAS. And I think that if there was something along the lines of that for apprenticeships run by, I don't know, by the government or by the businesses, then a lot more people would know that they exist. Because I think it's not that the apprenticeships are hard to find or that they're not there. It's just people don't know where to look for them.
So just making things more visible would make it more accessible to people.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Okay, Ben, I'm going to ask you if there's anything that you think that apprenticeships, anything we should change in apprenticeships in the sector to make them better for those going through the schemes?
Well, I think to first of all improve apprenticeships, we have to obviously publicise them a lot more, don't we? I think just touching on what Elise ended on there, I think my sixth form in college measured their success by how many students went to university, and I think that kind of shows just how much apprenticeships are first of all overlooked. I think if we can promote apprenticeships a lot more, then the whole apprenticeship can be improved. In terms of what the businesses get out of us, if we're also promoting apprenticeships and that kind of thing, then we are surely taking in a better intake of candidates to choose from and that kind of thing. But as for a journey itself, from my point of view, from the apprenticeship that I've had, the only kind of improvements that I would like to see would be more to do engagements with other nuclear companies. The only other kind of external engagements that we have are when we go to university one day a week. So we have got within our cohort at university intakes from EDF, from the ONR and from Westinghouse. And I think that's growing as the years go by, because my year is the first kind of like, we call us the guinea pigs. So we're quite a relatively small cohort compared to the others. And I think I'm sure there's a kind of a different kind of experiences of apprenticeships throughout the panelists. I think if all the companies kind of collaborated a lot more and standardized how we do things and kind of take the best practices from each apprenticeship, I think we can kind of overall across the UK not only have just one good apprenticeship within one company, but we can kind of like have raise the overall level of apprenticeships, particularly within the nuclear function.
Yeah, great. That's really great and insightful feedback there. Thank you. Okay, so obviously the last year has been really challenging because of COVID, and that's affected undoubtedly what's happened with apprenticeships across the UK, not just in our sector. But I'm keen to maybe just explore this a bit further and ask Lewis to share with us his thoughts on how relevant apprenticeships are going to be in this kind of post-COVID world that we're going to be living in.
Yeah, sure, no problem, Jenny. So, I mean, whether we like it or not, I suppose the world is changing. And I think over this past 12 months, when we think about, COVID-19 and the pandemic, I think that change has accelerated. It's accelerated somewhat in the way we live our lives, but also the way we work. And I think this new way of working is a challenge sometimes. And when I think about apprenticeships and I think about what we need from a business point of view, I think succession management is massive. We've got the right skill set at the right positions at the right times, and we have that opportunity to develop individuals and invest in individuals to ensure we've got that skill set. So I think for me, apprenticeships play a key role in ensuring that going forward. And I mean, I wonder how many people right now have started a university place in the last few years and then think, well, the world's changed so much in the last 12 months. Is this role I was still chasing still a role that exists? I feel like with some good forward planning and a solid people plan within a business, we can definitely ensure that those people coming through an apprenticeship scheme are hitting the ground running and adding some real value. Are you still there, Jenny?
Still here.
And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, and then I'm going to move on to the question feed, and just got one final question before I move on to the questions. We've got quite a few that have come in, but just to kind of close off the pre-prepared questions. Katie, Lewis, I'm going to come to you and just ask you, what are your hopes for the future of the nuclear industry? So if I start with Katie.
So I think for me, like, my hopes is that, like, we kind of continue to make the nuclear sector, like, more inclusive and diverse. Like, it already is within the industry that I'm working within now. But nuclear itself, it's constantly ever changing, and I think that's why I enjoy working within it so much. Like, after nearly 3 years, you know that one day is never going to be the same, and I've come to learn also how male dominated the workforce is at times. And I think my goal is to encourage and empower more women to be a part of it, because as a woman in nuclear myself, like, the satisfaction and reward I get from knowing that I'm helping towards the safe and significant reduction of nuclear and radioactive waste, it's incredible. And I think I have every confidence that we will continue with the amazing progress that we're already currently making.
Great, thank you. And Lewis, if I come to you.
Yeah, I'd agree with Katie on a lot of that, actually. I think one thing that I've observed throughout my career is the improved balance when it comes to diversity. I think it's evident in the workplace, the benefit and the value of a diverse workforce. And I feel apprenticeships have played a real important role in ensuring we improve that balance and we get the right diversity. And it gives people the confidence, I think, like Kay was mentioned earlier, to go down a route that previously other people didn't walk. So obviously when I arrived in the industry, it was very male dominated. And I think it's great to see that I think somewhere around 50% of the apprentices now coming through HPC are female, which is fantastic to help us support that diversity drive. I also, for the nuclear industry, I mean, obviously I wanted to succeed. I want us to succeed in meeting our net zero targets for the future. And I think it's a very exciting time with the construction of Hinkley Point C and future construction of Sizewell C. But the most important thing for the industry is the right people, the right skill set. And like going back to one of my previous points, I think the apprenticeship scheme provides us with the opportunity to ensure we're investing in our people for the future.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with both of your comments. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the panel questions, and we've had some great questions in, and some I think everybody's feeling very inspired by what you've all been saying. So we've had a question here from somebody who says, really inspiring to hear your journeys, and obviously all of you have studied technical apprenticeships, but what opportunities are there for people joining the sector who want to go down a non-technical route, for example, law or accountancy? So I'm going to pass that question to Katie. With a site as large as Sellafield, I'm guessing there's some opportunities beyond the technical apprenticeships.
So in Sellafield, there is so many different routes you can go down. So for me, like, I went down a nuclear workers route, but you've also got HR, you've got project management. So within HR, you could be supporting managers in obviously different professions. So that's a route you can go down. You can also do shared services. So within HR, you've got that, which is towards helping recruit people. So even though you'll have people coming through like a general HR like kind of route, it's split off into different sections. So it's not just one team handling it. There's also routes like the project management. I think that's a higher apprenticeship that you go in as, and I'm sure that's over 4 years. I'm sure there is another apprenticeship, and it's your firefighters. So you can go in as a firefighter now for Sellafield. That's the same apprentice, same time length as mine. So that's 2 years. I do feel like there is a lot more options than what people seem to go in at. There is the whole thing of, oh, you go in as mechanical, you go in as electrical, you go in as a process worker. That's not necessarily the case for some people. For me, I'd done an office job for 5 years, and in that 5 years I realised that that wasn't for me. But I went into a practical role, and it's as if I was meant to do this. It's everything that I need to be doing. I'm on plan. I'm doing stuff, like I'm actually going out and doing my job. Whereas for some people, they do prefer being in a desk and office scenario. So with Sellafield, there is a lot of scope to obviously move about and obviously see kind of where you want to go. Because even if you went in as business admin, you don't necessarily have to stay within business admin. You can move into kind of different projects. You can look at HR. You can look at being secretaries. There is a huge scope of what there is, and the opportunities are endless. It's so big. There is just so much potential for you when you are on site.
Great. Thank you. Ben, have you got any experience of alternative apprenticeships, BAE?
Yeah, so we have a multitude of different kind of entry points that you can get into BAE with. In terms of apprenticeship, so we've got kind of like 3 different routes. So our first kind of entry route, which is from school, are more of your craft apprenticeships and things like that. They're generally more apprenticeships, which are what we call being more on the shop floor. So they're your mechanical and electrical, and there's a lot more different disciplines through that route. The route that I took was classed as a degree apprenticeship or a higher apprenticeship when I first applied, and that was coming in through after A levels. And within that entry point, that was where nuclear obviously was. There's HR, as Katie's alluded to. I think there's project management is quite a big sector to be exiting into. They take on quite a lot of project managers each year. And I think there's probably about up to 10 different disciplines. The next entry point would be when you have a degree, you can enter our BAE site with the graduate scheme. And within that scheme, you obviously have got a related degree, and you spend 2 years within that role developing that skill set. I think it's not just, you don't have to be a nuclear engineer or nuclear-minded person to work within a nuclear company. I think that kind of mindset won't get you that far, and you might be shutting off quite a lot of doors if that's what you are thinking. There's a whole different skills that a nuclear industry needs to thrive as a nuclear industry, not just being nuclear engineers. So I definitely recommend at least looking into it and researching it. Even if being nuclear or maths and physics and things like that wasn't your forte. I think there's a lot of opportunities within it where you can move around different roles within the business as well, and obviously you can transfer that skill set to other nuclear businesses as well. But yeah, I wouldn't overlook working within a nuclear company just because you're not physics or maths minded.
No, that's great, thank you. And I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier about visibility of some of these alternative routes and alternative career options into the industry. Okay, so I've been asked about your career ambitions. So if I just pick a few of you to maybe describe where you see your career going and what your ambitions are. So if I start with yourself, Mike.
Well, the next stage would just be to get my tickets and everything to officially senior supervise and put men to work and things like that. And in the future, hopefully go up a step again and into construction management and maybe in the project lead office then. And there's no reason why it can't be done, especially working for the likes of Bylaw. They promote these sorts of things, and as do EDF.
Okay, thank you. Elise?
Yeah, I suppose it'll be sort of getting all the qualifications that come with my apprenticeship. So I've obviously done the level 2 MVQ, but it'll be doing my level 4 one that I'm currently doing now, as well as my mechanical engineering foundation degree and the top up to be a bachelor's. And alongside that, probably the biggest goal is getting sort of accredited Eng Tech, and I Eng that with the IET. That would be the best thing to come out of my apprenticeship. That's a goal.
Great, thank you. Lewis, from your perspective, where do you see your career going?
That's an interesting question. I think if I put myself back in the shoes of the apprenticeship scheme when I was there, my vision was different than what it is now, I suppose, and that's thanks to the apprenticeship scheme, I suppose. When I joined, I had a very linear career path ahead of myself that I worked out in my mind, and I thought, yeah, I'll be a technician, I'll become an engineer, I'll become a group lead, and then I'll become a manager of a maintenance department. And it was quite a clear path. And actually, through getting this exposure to loads of different roles and different challenges, you start to learn a lot about yourself and where your strengths and weaknesses are, as was mentioned earlier. And I actually realised myself when I got to the engineer level and I was on my career path, a very linear one, that I thought, I'm lacking in some skills. I perceived myself to be a great manager, which I wanted to be at that time. And I thought I was lacking in confidence, communication skills, that sort of stuff. And that's why, when I explained my career history earlier, I took that sideways step in a sense to move into becoming an instructor. And that being an instructor gave me the opportunity to gain them sort of soft skills in terms of communication and confidence and presentation skills. And that really built me up. And then after that, I realised that sideways step, it opened up so many more doors for me, and then the next step moved to France. That opened up more doors for me. And I've continued to do that. And I'm at a point now in my career where I'm 38 and I'm already a senior manager within the company. So extremely proud of what I've achieved so far. But I'm really keen to see where my potential can take me. And, I'd love to reach director level within the company. That would be an ambition of mine.
Great, thank you. Really good to hear all of your hopes for the future, be it near term and kind of longer term. So we've had some questions in about whether or not you felt that you missed out by not going to university, not having the experience of living away from home, and the whole kind of university experience. So I know we've talked a little bit about the kind of benefit of apprenticeships over going through different routes, but I'm just keen to understand from you all what your thoughts are on kind of missing out on that opportunity. So if I ask Katie first of all.
I think for me, university wasn't really an option of mine. Like, I'm not very academic. I basically got through school, got my GCSEs. I didn't enjoy school, and like I say this to this day, like as soon as I got out and I worked on getting my maths, I always kind of knew that I wanted to either have a job or have an apprenticeship, because I didn't want the debt for one, and also I knew that I liked being in a working environment. So when I kind of weighed up my options of which route would be the best for me, I always knew it would be an apprenticeship. So once I got the qualifications that I needed and I looked into the sort of apprenticeships that were available, for years it always stood out being a process worker for me, because it was more practical than it was the theory side of it. I knew it would be academic in some sense, but I just think university is for some people. Some people do get a lot away from it, the opportunity of getting to go away, obviously gaining a degree, but I think an apprenticeship can provide that just as much. And as well as that, you get an industry experience. Like a couple of them have already mentioned, like you're on the job, you're learning the job. Whereas sometimes with a university, you can go and get the degree for 3 years, but do you actually have that experience of being in that role and doing that job? And I know some obviously offer you placement years, but I just think apprenticeship is just a good route to go down, even if it's degree. If you're going in at the level that I did, which was an MVQ level 2, you take away a lot more knowledge and a lot more like practical side of it than I think what you would maybe going to university. That's just my opinion, though. Other people may have different views. Other people may want to head to university, but I think definitely looking at degree apprenticeships if that is a route that you want to go down, because you'll save yourself a ton of money.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Elise, maybe you could answer that question, and also maybe just fold into that, how did it feel doing something different from your peer group at school, and what did your friends say at the time, and did you feel that you were therefore kind of missing out by not doing the same as them?
So I don't feel like I've missed out at all. I think the biggest thing that people take as the difference is the social aspect. You don't have that going out, that nightlife sort of aspect that I think everyone wants from university, because obviously you're working and that's not really feasible. But I don't feel like I've missed out on that. I haven't missed out on that, I don't think. Obviously I got to stay in a sort of student style accommodation for the first year, and there wasn't quite so much pressure of doing your sort of work for the company, being in industry, being in the office. There wasn't that sort of pressure of that in the first year, so there was time for us to be more social, to go out a bit. But no, I think it was really difficult at school, and none of my friends seem to understand what I'm doing. Even if I explain it to them, they just don't seem to get what I'm doing. They don't seem to get that I have a sort of job and responsibilities, and I'm part of a company. And it's sort of at school they were kind of looked down on what I was doing, as if it wasn't as good as them. And I'm like, but how can you say what I'm doing isn't as good as what you're doing? Because I'm getting a degree which is equivalent to yours from a good university, and I'm coming out of this with 4 years of work experience, which you could only get 1 if you did a placement year. And I don't have any kind of debt or anything. I'm like, this is paid for me. So I'm 19 and I'm already earning a pension, which is something that they wouldn't have even thought about. And looking at it now, like, I'm got a really stable job and I'm really happy with my decision, whereas my older brother, he's done 3 years in a master's at a really good university, but he's unemployed, and he's been unemployed since he finished his master's. So it's sort of, are you that much better off having gone just conventionally to university? Like, I don't think so. This is probably one of the best decisions I could have made, and it's a shame that my peers at school can't see that.
Lots of nodding there from the other panel members, so obviously agreeing with everything that you guys said there. So there's been a few questions in about the transferability of skills between a nuclear and engineering apprenticeship into other sectors, and whether or not you think you'll use that to leave the sector and go and do something else, and if there's any other sectors that appeal to you. So if I start by asking Ben.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question in itself, because where I live, it's in our kind of local town. Quite a lot of the town work in the shipyard, and I think if you're talking as nuclear as a whole, there's obviously civil nuclear, which is your power plants and that kind of thing, and then there's defence, which is what we work in. And I think it's within the whole civil kind of sector, I think it would be a lot easier to kind of transfer to different power stations and different sectors within civil. Not to say that the skills that I've learned through university and in my current role aren't transferable, but I think it's often, I think that kind of moving around might be a little bit kind of harder. I think the easiest way to move around in my kind of career within submarines is more internally. I can see the potential kind of available jobs that might be coming up in the next 10 or 20 years, looking at who's there now and that kind of thing. And I can kind of I can plot a bit of a mental kind of like career path that way as well. But I wouldn't just cross out or dismiss a career path rotating through different kind of like sectors as well. And also it's I think the only thing that I probably touched on one of the questions earlier about improving apprenticeships, it's probably knitting together the whole industry as a whole, and kind of allowing everyone to have a holistic view of nuclear who works within nuclear industry. I'm not sure if that makes too much sense, but I feel like it's a little bit disjointed from my point of view. But yeah, I would kind of urge other people to look around, and I think moving around different sectors within the civil and defence is definitely something we're pursuing.
Thank you. And Mike, what's your thoughts? And obviously you had a career before you came to Bylaw and Hinkley Point C, so what's your thoughts in terms of that transferability of skills that you've learned on site?
Yeah, I think with the right training and the right company, it's doable. I mean, I've found it that way anyway. Like I said, it was quite a scary jump, and on top of that, you had the turning up the first day with the daunting size of the site and things like that. And it's all about the company you're with, I think. And well, not all about the company. It's about yourself as well. You've got to want to do it. You've got to be prepared for things that you're not prepared for, if that makes sense. Yeah, I don't see why not. The apprentices that are out there at the moment, they're built for this, and I reiterate what Elise said pretty much about the earning capabilities. And Katie, I was always a hands-on person in my trade as a magazine printer. I did my GCSEs and then went straight into training to be a printer. I wasn't good with school and things like that, but I managed to get to a pretty good level in that. I was running the biggest, most expensive machinery in the world, and I was a management as well, and I took the jump over here, and it was a massive change in my life, and it's worked out well. And thinking about people that are, say, 16 going to be coming into this, it's not going to be such a big change where you've already gone in and trained and done something like that. It's the new start. I've done it twice now, and I would recommend probably the apprenticeship over anything, to be honest, because it brings a lot to the table and the opportunities are amazing.
Okay, I'm just going to ask one more question from the feed. Thank you. And it's around whether or not you think apprenticeships change your sort of feeling towards your employer, and whether they make you feel more loyal is the question to your employer. So if I come to Lewis to answer that question.
I mean, simply in my opinion, it would be a yes. I feel like, the apprenticeship for me, and I'll go back to what I said earlier actually. So when I left school at 16, I took on an apprenticeship at a local company, but that apprenticeship, it was so different to the apprenticeship that EDF Energy offered me. I mean, that was really, I was just doing a job, but one day a week going to college, and that was it. I was just working a job. I was a cheap member of staff for them. But then when I joined EDF Energy, I realised what an apprenticeship should be and what it's all about, and the investment they make in people, and how I developed massively throughout my whole apprenticeship scheme and beyond. And I think because of that realisation at the early days, and the fact that, I realise it's a great company to work for. I'm very much aligned to the culture that we have, and I feel loyal because I feel they've invested in me, and I feel I want to, repay that debt as much as I can. Hence the reason I'm still here 20 years later.
Great, thank you. And Katie, you work with a number of apprentices. What's your kind of perception of how they feel towards the company?
I would agree with quite a lot of what Lewis has said as well. You do feel like you have a bit of loyalty, like I know I do, to SL because of what they've provided and obviously given to me over the past 2 years, and I know what they'll continue to support and offer me over the numerous years that I'll continue to be there. And I think for us as apprentices, like when we went in, we were the second year to go through EPA, which is like your endpoint assessment, which has made the apprenticeship slightly more difficult. But when you do come out of your time and you have all this support and all the help that your company gives you, like what SL give to us, you do feel like you want to give back and you do want to help kind of get the company to progress, like especially when we went in as like operators too. So I'm still in touch with quite a few people in my cohort and they all seem to be doing really well. They're all kind of like actually starting to like move up the ladder themselves. It's slightly different with me. My plant's that big, it takes 18 months to learn. So I'm in the middle of getting swept off in my actual job role. But when I go into work and I kind of see what I'm doing and see what I'm contributing towards, it's right in like what Louis says, like you want to give back. And I feel like for me personally, like for what Salafield's given to me in the fact that they chose to take me on as an apprentice and give me all the things that they've given me and open up all these doors, I'd like to say, like it's like it's satisfaction, but it's also like, again, it's loyalty, and I know that my loyalty will always be with SL.
Great, thank you. I mean, we've had a number of comments through on the Q&A feed about what fantastic ambassadors you all are for the sector. And I think I've got time for one more question, and it's really around that whole point of being ambassadors. And if I just ask Elise, really, in terms of her thoughts on what else we could be doing and using people like yourselves to really be ambassadors for the sector, but also for apprenticeships more broadly.
Yeah, it's definitely doing things like this and talking about your experience, talking about how you feel and what you've done and the impact you're making and how it's making your career better. Like, I went back to my school to talk about my job and what I'm doing, and I never had anything like that when I was in sixth form. Like, I didn't know that the girls in my school could go off and do that, and even little things like us going to one school that we went to still makes a difference. And it's important to do little things like that up to much bigger events like this.
So doing a lot of schools outreach activities as well.
Yeah, I think that outreach is really important, especially for like girls as well. Obviously, I went to an only girls school, so I might have a slightly different opinion because I've sort of come into this without any question that women can't do whatever they want. It doesn't matter. Like, if you can go into engineering, you can go into this. Like, I've come in with that mindset. And obviously, not every sort of school, not every girl's going to have that opinion. So it's definitely important to do that and share that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we're nearly at the end of time. I'm just going to ask a few of the panelists just to summarise, or any sort of particular things that have struck you through the discussion today and listening to your peers from other parts of the industry. So, Mike, I'll come to you first. Is there anything particularly that's kind of sort of struck you, or anything you wanted to add on reflection from today?
Well, we pretty much listened to everyone. It's pretty much everything everyone said. No one's here to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. I think one of the bigger things that jumped out at me was something that Lewis said about starting an apprenticeship, and it was literally like a cheap labour sort of thing. And then you go into a company then like EDF, and I basically work for EDF, or via a client route, and the difference is astronomical. I would choose wisely with who you take your apprenticeships with, be that technical or administrative or anything like that. But it would make a difference, I think, if you're with a company of this sort of size, or anywhere near reputable. rather than just a one-man band or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with all of them or whatever, but you can have those experiences like Lewis had. And I can massively, it hit me big because it goes with, like, I'm not very good with words, but it puts things in perspective about what I'm trying to say about the opportunities that working for Bylaw has brought with me. They've released me to college for weeks at a time with students from Loughborough University training to be construction managers, and had me take half of the students and teaching them what I've been taught in college, and that was before I'd even completed the apprenticeship. And things like that, they boost your confidence, and you can. I fell out of love with supervising in my old job, and now I'm back doing it again. It made me fall back in love with it again, and I wouldn't have got these opportunities without being with the right company. So just choose wisely with the companies.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Yeah, and as you say, maybe not everything's equal. So thank you.
Yeah.
Ben, any summary or any thoughts from this morning's session?
I'd just reiterate some of the key points. So the main one that struck with me was when we were talking about the differences between apprenticeships and people going to university. From my experience, and I've seen my partner go through this as well, is she shared her opinion. When you go through university, you kind of, not everyone has a clear career path after then. I think Elise talked and said that her brother's currently kind of like is looking for jobs and things like that. I think there's a lot of it, and it's described to me like you just fall off a cliff. There's no kind of where do you go next, because you go through school, then you know you're going to go to college, then you know you can go to university, and then where you've got to search the world to find someone to employ you then. And I think having an apprenticeship route kind of knits that together. You don't fall off a cliff, or there's no kind of, you do have a blanket of security as well. One of the things that I tell our kind of like current first year apprentices coming through is that you do have a lot of less pressure. You are here to learn. The expectation of you isn't as great as someone is coming into a job and starting day one and have got this wealth of experience and knowledge behind them and that kind of thing. So you are kind of like supported by that as well. That for me was something which kind of comforted me in a way, to know that I am here to learn still. And I used to think, 1 year in, I'm supposed to know everything now, and you're not. You're there to just absorb it as you go through. But no, I would, if you do take up a career within the nuclear industry, I would just take it in, just learn, and just enjoy it, I guess.
Great, thank you. And finally, if I come to Elise, just to give her thoughts.
I think it was what Kate said about being confident and being yourself. Like all these employers, they've picked you, and they're here to put their time and effort and money into you and making you the sort of best person and employee and have the best skill set that you can. And that's a really great opportunity. You don't really get that anywhere else when you've got these people who want you to be the best person. I think that's why we're all so lucky to have such good opportunities doing these apprenticeships, when we get that out of it, and I don't think you can find that anywhere else.
Brilliant. Okay, well, it just leaves me to say a massive thank you to all of our panel members. I mean, I feel really inspired listening to all of you. I wish that I could go and start an apprenticeship now, and the opportunities that you're creating for yourselves through the apprenticeship routes that you're following and further into your career just sound so exciting. And I know that from the questions that people have been posing, I think everybody's feeling the same, feeling really engaged and inspired by what you're all doing. And as I said, you're massive advocates for the sector and for apprenticeships. And I think the more we can do to encourage people to see it as a viable route into employment is great. And you guys are great advocates for that. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences and taking the time out to talk about what apprenticeships have meant for you as individuals. Thank you.